Okay, so now that we sprued our restorations, if you notice, they're about a 45-degree angle. It is sprued on the buccal cusp here, and if you notice, the occlusal plane or the occlusion of the molar is also at an angle. It's not perpendicular to the base, which would allow us to catch bubbles. So as the bubbles rise from the bottom, and if it hits the occlusal, it actually will roll off it and escape. If this was at a perpendicular angle, the bubbles would stay at the occlusion. Okay, so the second thing is the placement of the patterns. The placement of the patterns should be outside the heat zone. The heat zone is in this middle area. So as you can see, the patterns are placed outside of the heat zone, outside of the center of the ring. When we put on the actual casting ring, we will notice that the patterns are closer to the outside. Now the inlay is very small, so if it's slightly outside the heat zone, it's okay, because the mass is so little and chances are it will cool very fast. The sprue is very thick, so it will retain heat, and the inlay will actually cool before the sprue. However, when we get to the crown, we can see it's a much bigger mass. So we have actually placed a reservoir in between the sprue former and the restoration, and that reservoir is inside the heat zone, keeping it molten longer so that it can feed the restoration and not get suckback porosity. Suckback porosity is a porosity that happens when the sprue cools first and the restoration cools second. The sprue cools first and the restoration cools second. The restoration will try to draw metal from the sprue, which is already solidified, and because of that, it's not able to supply more metal to the shrinking pattern or the shrinking restoration. So with that said, let's mix the investment and let's see how we pour it. The first step is to use surface tension remover, otherwise known as debubbleizer, on the patterns, and on the patterns only. We don't want to use it on the entire ring, because then we just wet the ring. The surface tension remover, if it remains too wet, like so, and there's puddles in the restoration and the outside of the ring is also wet, it might affect the strength of the investment because of the differences in chemical composition. So normally what you would want to do is you would want to dry the surface tension remover slightly and remove all those puddles from inside. So we would just blow it out with some air. Okay, now we blew it out, so we have a little bit left inside the patterns and covering the patterns. At this point we'll put the investment ring back and we shall mix the investment. Okay, so this is our investment bowl. So now this is a vacuum mix type. So whenever we are mixing investment, we have to mix it under vacuum to reduce the bubbles or the porosity from the mix. First thing we'll do is we will measure out the liquid that we need. So as we have spoken before, we need a special liquid. and we need distilled water. Okay. So for this mix, this is a 200-gram ring, so we will take two 100-gram packets. Now if we look at the investment packet, we shall see that this is a 100-gram packet, so it requires 25 milliliters of liquid total. So part of that will be the special liquid, which is a pink color, and part of it would be the distilled water. So now what we'll need to do is take a look at the instruction manual, which I'm going to put up a picture of. Okay, these are the full instructions for the bagel investment, and you can take a look at this. You may stop the video if you like and write some of the things down that you would like to remember. And this picture is a magnified version of the little area where they show you the ratios for the special liquid for all the different types of metals that we may encounter in this class. We are using non-precious metal, so as the instruction manual says, we will need 90% special liquid and 10% water, or distilled water to be more specific. Okay, so let's start. So the first thing we do is we will moisten the bowl, because as you can see there's scratches inside and that holds water as well, so it would kind of soak up some of the amount of liquid, and we don't want that because we want to have the exact liquid required to mix this investment. So we kind of moisten it. You don't want to leave too much water in there, you just want to make sure that the bowl is moist. Then we will measure out the water. So next we'll measure out the water, and that's 2.5 milliliters. Now we'll measure out the special liquid, and this will be 23.5. And we'll measure out the liquid now. This will be 22.5. So what we have to do, if we measure it in this one, is just complete the amount to 25. And then of course we have to double it. So the next thing we'll do is put in the investment packet and mix it. Since this is pre-measured, I'll take this opportunity to do liquid first and powder second. That's always the most efficient way to mix. We have to pre-mix it, make sure the consistency is smooth, and then we'll put it into a vacuum mixer, and that will mix it further. Okay, so you want to wipe off the sides and maybe even wet it a little bit so that we get a good vacuum seal. Okay, so here we go. We'll turn it on first. We're gonna lock it in and we put in the vacuum. So as we mix it, you can see the vacuum supposed to be in the green. The vacuum supposed to be in the green. So once we finish mixing for about a minute or so, sometimes 30 seconds, depends on how cold it is or how hot it is, because it will affect our setting time. So the next thing we're going to do is turn on the vibrating unit, and we can use a small instrument, get all the investment of the spatula. And we're going to use a small instrument or a knife, whatever you like, and then we're going to slowly drip the investment under vibration into the restoration, very slowly, and watch it flow all over the inside. And we can drip a little bit on the inlay just to cover the surface, and then pour it slowly, pour the ring full of investment. And just fill up the ring. Filling up the ring is important for us because we are using an induction casting machine, and the ring is made specifically the right height so that we can stabilize that ring in the machine and the metal flows directly into the screw former. So now we're going to just make sure we clean the spatula, clean the bowl right away, because as you can see, it already started setting. Do not throw this in the sink, because as it sets up, it's going to clog it. If it has a plaster trap, then the plaster trap will fill up too fast. So let's quickly clean this up, and we're done with investing. Now it's important to clean it up right away because the investment sticks, and it is extremely difficult to remove the investment from the bowl once it's set up. And even if you can remove it, you end up damaging the bowl. As you can see, this bowl is kind of damaged already, so we want to make sure we don't damage it further. Okay, now that the investment is setting, we will leave it to set for approximately 25 minutes minimum. But you don't want to leave it much past that. I would recommend that you don't leave it past 30 minutes. After that, we will place it in the oven for approximately 45 minutes after it has reached 1650. So with this investment, we can place it in the oven at 1650 and then wait the 45 minutes, then cast. Sometimes other investments require a slow temperature rise. In those cases, it could take as long as 2 hours for the investment to reach the temperature of 1650. And then in addition to that, we will have to wait the 45 minutes until the wax completely burns out. Okay, now that the investment has set up, now we need to remove it from our silicone ring. So the next thing we'll do is we will remove the bottom, which is done a small little twist like this. And as you can see, there's the investment ring. So it's a negative representation of our wax up and whatever wax we put on there. These areas have thin coats of investment since it went a little bit underneath. So we have to be careful for this not to fall into the center, because that will allow the material to go inside the mold, especially if it stays there when you were casting, and we don't want that, because then this material will be incorporated into our casting. So if you notice, this ring is slightly tapered out towards here, so then we have to remove it from here, not from here, because this is smaller, so it won't be able to fit through there. So what we will do is we're going to push it from the bottom little by little. If it doesn't go, we can peel it back a little bit from each side, and then slowly push it out. You see the side here, it's kind of breaking free little by little, and then it pops out. Then slowly we remove it, and we make sure there's nothing inside here. If you look at this mold carefully now, the very top is extremely smooth. So what we'll have to do is we'll have to remove this really glazed surface, and we can do that either by scraping with a plaster knife or using a model trimmer. In this case, we'll use the model trimmer. So we'll turn it on. So we just need to do it a little bit, just until that skin is gone. And then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to place it in an oven. Now, if this has been setting for 25 minutes, then this oven would be at 1650. And then we would place it in there with the tongs. In this case, it has been sitting around for a while. So in this case, when we turn on the oven, we have to make sure that this oven is climbing very slowly. So we will put it in the center of either one of these little slabs, or if there's more than one ring, then we can stagger the rings back and forth so that there's an even amount of space between the rings. And then we will close this, and the oven will automatically slowly go up to 1650, and then it would hold there for about 45 minutes. The other way, if we put it in the oven directly at 1650, then we don't have to wait for this. This will probably take 2 hours, 2.5 hours to go up, and then you have to wait. If the oven's already at 1650, then we just put in the ring, and we will wait the 45 minutes, and then we're ready to cast it with the casting machine. Okay? So our next step will be actually casting.